Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is StepsBasic, and welcome back to my community show. But anyway, so today's topic is an interesting one, but going into it, I want you to bear in mind that I have no, degree in quantum physics or anything like that, so take everything I'm going to say and understand that this is just purely from a story topic, as it were. And it's not so much a matter of I know what I'm talking about, more of a matter of this is how I kind of envisioned it within a story I have written. So bear in mind with that. So today I wanted to talk about multiverse theory. Now this is an interesting thing, and if you've watched, well, let's go with Marvel because they're the more recent one. But if you go with what other people have talked about, they talk about how every choice you make creates a branch, creates an alternate reality to the point where it's an innumerable sort of thing. Well, I like that idea. I think it's an interesting one. And one of my favorite shows ever was a show called Sliders, and unfortunately in later seasons it kind of devolved into something that was somewhat unrecognizable from the fun, just going to different dimensions and seeing what they look like compared to our basic universe, and it was a kind of an interesting thing. One of the standout episodes for me was an episode about the lottery, which was interesting because you could take out as much money as you wanted, and however much money you wanted added to how much of an opportunity you had to be selected for said lottery. What the travelers didn't understand was that the lottery meant that they were going to die, because this was this world's method of population control. And to me, while the thing I like most about that thing is it demonstrates the idea of how, kind of like going to a foreign country and experiencing something that your culture may not deem as savory, satisfying, etc. And of course, not going into the extremes or anything, but in this case, it was something that everybody in that world had subscribed to. Everything everybody understood was a good thing for their country, for their world, as it were, for their universe, because it kept the population at a manageable level. But to us, the viewer, we're watching this from the perspective of the Sliders, and we see this as oh my God, look, they're killing people. That's not a good thing. But everybody in the world had subscribed to this idea. They agreed with it because it kept the world manageable and kept all of the resources within a decent, healthy place. And, there were other things like birth control was in the soda, so if you drank the soda, you were birth controlling yourself, but, that sort of thing. So looking at this from an outside perspective as a foreigner, so to speak, we see that, oh my God. And this came about by the choice of the government deciding, hey, we are in danger of overpopulation. We are running out of resources, so let's figure this out. And thus rose the lottery. And of course, our own people, our own Sliders there, got selected for the lottery. Otherwise, it wouldn't really be much of a story. And so they had to do that. But anyway, so the reason I want to talk about this, honestly, is because I was watching the show Loki recently, finally getting around to it. And I'm like, woo, hey, you can see my Xbox Game Pass thing I need to use. But anyway, so I was watching that show, and the thing is, like, understanding what they were doing, i.e. pruning the timeline, and of course you can talk about what they were actually doing and whatnot. You can get into that, but without any spoilers, it was fairly obvious that they weren't just pruning every single deviation. Rather, they were pruning for a purpose, as it were. And so yeah, there we go. But anyway, that's not really what we're talking about. I want to talk about a specific character in one of my stories, which I used to demonstrate my understanding or my belief or my story idea for the multiverse theory. Now, of course, my character was not your traditional hero in that he wasn't a overly large built, gonna kick all the butts of the bad guys sort of guy, but he was a middle-aged, little overweight, balding, but not tall. He was about like 5'7", so not really tall, but not really short either. So he was kind of very, middling, kind of the person that would just disappear into the background, and he liked that because what he could do, his power was he could see fate lines, and after a while he discovered that he could manipulate those fate lines to the point where he could get people to leave him alone, and that was something that he needed because he liked being unseen. He liked being a background character because he saw himself as more of a documentarian. Now, what he could do was he could follow fate lines, and what he would see were moments in time, moments in that character, that person's life, which created a deviation. Now, the way he put it was not every choice results in an alternate universe. Not every choice results in a complete branch, as it were. So if you look at it like this is our timeline, right? And now, according to multiverse theory, something as simple as choosing a different shirt in the morning could result in a completely different universe. Now, of course, his observation was that this was bull honky because your shirt has no... Excuse me. Because your shirt has no effect on people who are never going to see you. And as such, you would see the Earth within its own little area, with its own little branching situations. And of course, expanding that to other worlds and other planets and other universes and whatnot, Earth is fairly insignificant. Now, even in so much as on Earth, your shirt is not going to affect the political ramifications of a decision made in Istanbul, for say. And so it would be like this. He would say, this is our timeline. This is you choosing your shirt. You choose your shirt, and bottom is you choose red, top you choose yellow. It creates a bump which corrects itself almost immediately. So not every decision you make creates a branching timeline. But there were, of course, times when your choice would create a significant ramification, a significant change within the universe. And he called those, pivotal moments, or, nexus events, whatever you want to call them. They exist within all sorts of forms of storytelling that involve the multiverse. But he called them pivotal points within your life where you would see the person's fate line. And what he would see was sort of a cracked glass, which would be the deviation, or the pivot, as it were, and you would be able to decide to go would decide which way he could go. So he could follow the standard path, which is our universe, as it were, our dimension, or he could follow the other path and see what happened as a result. And he could see past and present fate lines. The only difference was that, past ones, he could kind of just ignore. If the person was dead, he didn't have to see it. He could see it if he wanted to. He'd have to focus on it. But if they were dead, he couldn't see it that way. Storytelling-wise, if he could see every single fate line ever, well, there would be no room for him to walk. He'd just be fate lines everywhere. He wouldn't see anything. As it is, even with an overblown population, he can see fate lines everywhere. And what he started to notice was that some people's fate lines were not important at all. Like, they would create no deviations, no pivotal points. They would just be one point to the other. He called them, as you would probably understand, NPCs. People who are set on a path to follow their life and they die. No important impact at all. And whatnot. And he would realize that a lot of people's fate lines may have started out better, and he could follow them all the way back to the point of conception, so to speak. And he would see that their fate line would not deviate except for way back in the beginning, and then would not change anything. And then other people, he could see that their life could be faded out, perfectly normal, average NPC life, until the very end, or closer to the end, when they would make a decision that would save the world or affect life and whatnot. And then it would create a pivotal point where their life, their fate line would become far more significant, far more important. Instead of this tiny little string, it would become yarn or something like that. That sort of thing. And I always thought that was kind of interesting. Because for the most part, our lives as human beings are fairly inconsequential when it comes to sorts of things. Take a global crisis, Your average everyday Joe like me on the YouTubes making stupid videos and entertaining people, I'm not going to affect the world. I'm going to make some people laugh and maybe give somebody a better day, but for the most part, I'm really inconsequential when it comes to most of the world. Well, within my small little sphere, of course, my microcosm, if you will, I affect the people in my life. I only have one life. I affect the people in my life, so, me being there does kind of have an effect. But if you start branching out even beyond like 10 people, my life just kind of fades into a small little line. Now, what this sort of idea led to was like, that idea is creating sort of pocket dimensions within our main universe. So we have our own timeline, and that's where the bump is. This little bump right here, if you start to zoom out from the timeline, that bump becomes even smaller and smaller. So what this bump is, on the grander scheme of things, is my own life. Whereas this is my normal life, and this is the life where I chose different path, like I didn't join the Navy or something like that. And this little microcosm, when you zoom out even further, disappears into, well, nothingness. But anyway, I've always thought that the idea of multiverse theory, multiverse exploration especially, is a fairly interesting plot mechanic, fairly interesting idea within a universe. Now, of course, making an entire show, book, movie, etc. based on it can sometimes lead to things going awry because, you never know exactly where to draw the line, how outlandish and how crazy you can make it. Like the idea of humans not evolving past something, past, a primordial being, kind of just beggars belief, because humanity as a whole is fairly consequential on the planet. Of course, going back, to the idea of how we affect the entire universe remains to be seen, because we have yet to, successfully leave our planet. Now, we've left it, obviously, but, we cannot live anywhere else other than our planet. But you know what I mean. But that sort of idea, like humanity not evolving, rather, like lizards or something evolving to take our place, does that also mean that I exist in another universe where humans didn't evolve, and yet I am a sentient potato or something? That's an interesting observation and a different discussion for a different time. But, it's still a fairly interesting topic to talk about. And, in the event of the question of the day, what sort of multiverse theory do you believe in? / what sort of alternate universe would you think would be more fascinating? But anyway, apart from all that, on to updates. We have finished off both pre-sequel and Borderlands 2, so we will be starting up Borderlands 3 come Monday. Will be the first episode. Woo. And apart from that, my blood pressure has been fluctuating still. I had it down below 100 on the diastolic pressure a couple of times, which was nice, but it mostly just fluctuates between low 100 and high 90. So it's not in a good place yet, but I'm working on it, and I'm getting there. Apart from that, I'm going to continue working with Final Fantasy VII Intermission, and hopefully I'll be able to get better content out of it, because the last episode, especially with the dying in the middle part, kind of sucked. I mean, it was still somewhat entertaining, but I could do better, as it were. And, but apart from all that, that's all of my announcements. That's my topic for today, and I want to say thank you all so much for joining me for this episode of The Community Show. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, please go and poke that like button for me. If you'd like to see more from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And, of course, as always, you're more than welcome to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. When I can, if I can, you know all that jazz. And tune in next time for another topic at another time. And until then, good night.